Hi, fourth grade. Welcome back to your math lessons with Mrs. Kendall. We're going to continue working in chapter 21. Today, we'll be talking about turns. Yes, that's right. You heard it right. Turns. Now, although that sounds a little bit silly, let me bring it back to you with what we've been working on so far. In the last chapter, we studied angles. Angles are formed when two rays meet at a point. A circle has 360 degrees if you were to turn all the way around it. Now, to imagine this and what we're talking about, you need to imagine that the circle is actually broken into parts and pieces like a pie. So I have over here this drawing that I would love for you to copy down into your journal, as well as these notes about with the fraction, the turn, and the degrees that's shown. So pause your video, take down these notes, and then unpause so we can talk about it together. Now that you have these copied down into your journal, let me explain. A circle has a total of 360 degrees. Now, looking at a circle, I don't see any rays connecting together. So it's hard to imagine that there can be angles in a circle. Angles are measured in degrees. However, when we split up the circle, like you see here, I can split it into parts, and now I can see angles that have formed. If I split a circle in half, and then in half again, I end up with 4 pieces of the circle, and where they all meet, 90-degree angles or right angles are formed. Right angles measure 90 degrees. You can see here that these 4 pieces is the same thing as saying 90 degrees plus 90 degrees plus 90 degrees plus 90 degrees. And those all, when you added them up, all equal 360 degrees. No matter how many times I split up this circle, if I measured the angles that are made from drawing lines across the diameter of the circle in different ways, I will always add up to 360 degrees in total. So now that we have that understanding, let's talk about turns. When we talk about turns, we talk about turns as if you're working around a clock. So I want you to imagine the big white clocks with the black hands. The hands on a clock are like rays. Where they meet, they form an angle. I want you to imagine the clock hands moving around. If it turns a quarter of the way, that would be like the clock hand pointing up and over, making a right angle or 90 degrees. That's called a quarter turn. A half turn would be having one arrow on the clock pointing up at the 12 and the other pointing down at the 6. That's called a half turn because we've gone halfway around the circle from the starting point. That measures 90 degrees plus another 90 degrees, which equals 180 degrees in total. That's called a half turn. Then, a 3/4 of the way turn. A 3/4 turn would be with 3 pieces of this pie. 90, 90, and another 90. 90 plus 90 plus 90 equals 270 degrees. So a 3/4 turn is 270 degrees out of the 360 in the whole circle. A 3/4 turn is made up of 3 quarters, and then the remaining piece is just one left over. Do you see how that looks a little bit like a fourth on the other side here? So a 3/4 turn has a quarter turn on the other side of it. Then we're left with the last kind of turn, which is called a full turn, which is where we start at one side of the circle here, and we turn all the way around and end up back at the top. So this time I have all 4 pieces of this circle, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and 90 degrees, which all equals 360 degrees in total. So this list for you is going to be really important to have nearby so that you don't have to visualize this every time, that you can look at your notes and it will help you visualize. So make sure you have those 4 written down. A quarter turn is 90 degrees, a half turn is 180 degrees, a 3/4 turn is 270 degrees, and a full turn, or all the way around the circle, is 360 degrees. Let's take a look at a clock to show how this works as well. So as you're looking at these turns, I want you to imagine a clock and the clock hands sticking out in different directions. So think about when we talk about hours, we talk about a full hour would be a full turn, or 360 degrees. A quarter of an hour would be a quarter turn, which would be 90 degrees. A half hour would be a half turn, which is 180 degrees. A 45 minutes past, or a quarter till the hour, would be a 3/4 turn, which is 270 degrees. So in hours, we can also think of these like the minutes that are made up. So on a clock, each minute is represented by 6 degrees. So in this first one, where we have a quarter of an hour, or 15 minutes, if we counted each minute as 6 degrees, that's how we end up with a total of 90 degrees. In a clock showing half an hour, or a half turn, that's 30 minutes multiplied by 6 degrees is 180 degrees. That's how we end up with that measurement. And then in a 3/4 of an hour, or 45 minutes, multiply that, each minute by 6 degrees, is 270 degrees in total, or a 3/4 turn around a circle. So this is just a visual for you. If this is confusing, what I want you to focus on is this part here, okay? But for those of you who are visual learners, it might help for you to imagine a clock. So whatever is easier for you, if you want to imagine a clock and that made sense to you, work with that. If you'd rather just look off of this list and memorize it, that's okay too. Let's do some practice. So we're going to look at some turns on a circle where 2 rays are meeting. Now, make sure that you look at where the red arrow is showing that it started and where it finished. The reason why is a lot of times these turns could look just like a quarter turn, but it's actually showing something entirely different. So make sure you look at where the arrow is pointing. We'll copy these into our notes as well. The directions say to tell whether the rays on the circle show a quarter turn, a half turn, 3/4 turn, or full turn. Then identify the number of degrees the rays have been turned clockwise or counterclockwise. So we need to identify the measurement in angles that turn stands for. So that would come from our chart here. Okay, so have that nearby as we work. Let's take a look at number 1. Let's draw out this circle. I see one ray pointing up and another ray pointing out, with that little red arrow going in between. I guess I could draw it red to help us visualize a little bit more. So that is definitely only a quarter of the circle. So this would be a quarter turn. So you can write that down, a quarter turn. And that equals 90 degrees because it forms a right angle in here. Do you see that? The right angle, square corner. All right, number 2. Again, we need to draw out a circle. Let's draw out the lines. This time it's going, starting from that bottom arrow around the circle to the top. So looking at that part of the circle that we've covered, that is 3/4 of the circle. Do you see that? This part left over here where the 90-degree angle is, that's not part of the turn. That's what's left over. So that means that 3 out of the 4 parts have been used for that turn. So that's a 3/4 turn. And 3/4 turn equals 270 degrees. So this is where that chart comes in handy. Number 3, let's draw our next circle. All right, this time we have one ray coming out at the side, the other at the other side. And that red arrow is starting from the left, moving over to the right. So that turn has covered half of the circle. So that means this is a half turn. A half turn equals 180 degrees. All right, let's do a few more. Number 5, I'll have to draw a little bit smaller for these. Oh wait, I skipped number 4. Sorry, friends, let's go back. Number 4. Okay, number 4, I have my rays pointing out to the right and down, and the angle that is measured is starting from the right side, moving over to the left. All right, what measurement turn is that? Is that a quarter, a half, 3/4, or a full turn? That again is just a quarter, so I'll write down a quarter turn. A quarter turn equals 90 degrees. All right, we're going to solve numbers 5 and 6, and then I'm going to have you do the rest on your own. Okay, numbers 5 and 6, I'm going to draw them at the same time to help me as I'm switching my colors. So you can be copying these as well. All right, so let's take a look at number 5. Number 5, I see that although I see a quarter measurement from that 90-degree angle, I'm looking at the red arrow, and that shows it covering 3/4 of the circle. So that would be a 3/4 turn. And 3/4 turns equal 270 degrees. Make sure you do the little open circle in the upper right-hand corner after the number. That is the degree symbol. So we say degrees, and that's the symbol to show that. All right, number 6 is a little bit different. This is our first one quite like this. It appears only one ray pointing out, but it's actually 2 stacked on top of each other, starting on one side, going all the way over to the other side. That is a full circle turn, so I'll write full turn. And a full turn around a circle equals 360 degrees. All right, I want you to solve number 7 and 8. Pause the video and then unpause when you're ready to hear the answer. All right, so you should have solved number 7 and 8 on your own, drawn that in your journal and worked it out. Number 7 was a quarter turn, which equals 90 degrees. And number 8 was a 3/4 turn, and that equals 270 degrees. All right, we're going to look at a couple real-life examples to see if we can pick out what degree is being shown based on the turn. Now, we're going to tell whether the figure has been turned 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees. So remember, we want to think of this in, has it turned a quarter of the way around the circle, a halfway around, 3/4 of the way around, or all the way around? So that would be, how did they phrase it on the other page? A full turn, or did it turn a full turn? So keep that in mind. That's what it's asking. And then it wants to know this piece, clockwise or counterclockwise. Let's take a note on this real quick. So clockwise, I'm going to add a new page for a note, and then we'll come back to this. Clockwise direction means that you are moving in the way of a clock. So a clock starts at 12, and it works around, the hands work around this way. So that would be clockwise. Counterclockwise, long word there, counterclockwise means the opposite direction of clock. So think of a clock starting at 12. Counterclockwise would be the opposite way. So that means it goes around the clock backwards. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then back up to 12. So counterclockwise means it's opposite of the way a clock turns. Clockwise means it's the same way a clock turns. Okay? So now that we have that in our notes, let's solve these problems. So number 9. Number 9, I see this measurement tool. I'm going to just sketch out the circle that I see. I do see 2 rays that are forming a right angle. And I see that the red line is showing me it starts at the top and goes all the way around to the side. I notice that that is 3/4 of the circle, so that's a 3/4 turn. 3/4 turn is equal to 270 degrees. So this is showing a 270 degree rotation. We need to say whether it's clockwise, so in the direction of a clock, or counterclockwise. Clockwise, remember, moves around like a clock. Counterclockwise is the opposite direction. This arrow is moving clockwise because that is the way a clock would move around, starting at the top, going to the right, and then back up. So this is clockwise. Number 10. I see a mailbox. How fun. So I'm going to draw that mailbox flag sticking up, and in where it's in its starting position is sticking out. I see the red arrow showing the turn is starting at the bottom position going up to the top. So I know that these rays are forming a right angle, which is 90 degrees. That's only made a 1/4 turn. It's only a 1/4 of a circle, so that's just a 90-degree turn. And I notice that it's starting from the bottom and it's moving left. So that tells me that's counterclockwise because a clock moves from the right to the left. Counterclockwise would move from the left to the right. So this is counterclockwise. Number 11. All right, number 11, I see a spinner, a red, blue, green, and yellow spinner. I'm going to just draw the rays on that spinner. I see that it's starting from the bottom, moving to the left up. That appears to be a half turn. It looks like half a circle when I look at that turn line. Half of a circle's degrees are 180 degrees. So a half turn is 180 degrees, and it's moving from the right up to the left. So anytime we move from the right over to the left, we are moving around like a clock. That is clockwise. Clockwise. That's the way a clock hand would move around a clock. So it's important to visualize that in your mind as you're solving these problems. Okay, we'll solve a couple more together. Number 12. All right, so I have a picture. I'm not even quite sure what that is, but I do see some rays have been formed, meeting at the middle, and I see that that turn is starting from the top, moving to the left. So I see it's only moved a 1/4 of the way, so that tells me it's a 1/4 turn. A 1/4 turn is worth 90 degrees in angle measurement. And I see that this turn is starting from the top and it's moving around from the left down. That's opposite of a clock, so that would be called counterclockwise. All right, I'm going to skip number 13. Let's work on 14 and 15. Number 14, I see there is this lightning bolt. I'm going to do the best I can to draw that. If it's not perfect, please forgive me. So I see starting from one side of the lightning bolt, moving all the way around back to the other side. I can clearly see that is a full circle that has been made by that turn. So that means it is a full turn, which means it's a full degree of the circle, which is 360 degrees. And if I followed this arrow around, starting where it started, following it around, I can tell we're moving in the direction a clock would move. So that means that it is clockwise. All right, last one we're going to do together, number 15. Okay, now this one is a little bit different. We have two hearts that have been put together. They're very interesting hearts here. And the lines that are made from those hearts, we're going to imagine, I'm going to draw with black to show you this. We're going to imagine the lines that have been made by these are running across the sides of the hearts. And the turn that is being made is having the heart start at the top, and it's being turned across this line in a half turn. The heart is starting at the top, it's being turned by a half turn. That's a 180-degree turn. A half turn is 180 degrees. Is that moving clockwise or counterclockwise? It's moving in the opposite direction of a clock, so that would be counterclockwise. Now, the reason for this lesson is to help us get used to the way we describe movement of figures. That's what this whole chapter is about. It's called geometric movement. So we're going to be using these terms, half turn, 180 degrees, 90 degrees, quarter turn, full turn, clockwise, counterclockwise. We're going to be using these terms in another lesson this week. So it's really important that we start small and understand with this part before we move on to the next part. So the two most important things before you start any independent practice: please make sure that you copy down these notes for clockwise and counterclockwise so that you know which direction is which. If you have a hard time visualizing that, you'll need to draw the pictures. Then please make sure that you have also copied down the chart at the beginning that lists off how much those turns are worth. Okay? If you don't have that listed down and the directions for clockwise, counterclockwise, this lesson might be really challenging for you to do by yourself. So now that I've said that, if you need to back up the video and pause and take those notes down before you start your work, please do that. For today, you're going to be working on 21.2. You're going to do all of the PW. And I want you to make sure that you pause the video, do your work, not looking at the video, and then come back and check your work to make sure that you've done it correctly. We have a Zoom meeting tomorrow, Wednesday. And so if you have questions on this part of the lesson, please make sure you come ready to Zoom to ask those questions, okay? Most important part is to make sure you have that chart written down for what quarter, half, 3/4, and a full turn equal, and clockwise and counterclockwise, that you have that information written down as well. Okay, so good luck on your work. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Come ready with questions to Zoom.